bargained away as a child for her mother's cure. A Lakota chief found her grown and stayed. The trade came to me 23 years after it was made. That is how I will tell it. Not from the beginning. There is no beginning I can find. Only a long chain of things that led to a morning in early spring, when a woman I had never seen walked across my camp without asking permission, and sat down across the fire from me, and looked at me the way a person looks when they have been practicing what to say for a very long time, and have decided not to say any of it. I am called Charging Bear by the Wasiku who write things down. My people know me by a name I will not put in this telling. It is not theirs to carry. I was, at the time of that morning, 51 years old. A chief in the old sense, which means a man who carries the weight of other people's lives in his chest at all times and is not thanked for it. I had been married twice. The first wife died of sickness when she was 27. The second left not to another man but to the agency life, the ration line, the slow grinding down of who she had been. I did not hate her for it. I understood it. But I lived alone after that, in a camp of 37 people who depended on me, and I had stopped expecting anything from the world except more of what the world had already given. The woman across my fire that morning was named Ilara Voss, though she did not tell me her father's name for 3 days. She was 31. She had pale hair the color of winter grass and eyes that were dark, which surprised me, dark eyes in a white face, the kind that made you look twice. She was not soft. She had the hands of someone who had worked hard in cold weather for a long time, and she sat the way people sit when they are used to the ground, knees folded, back straight, no fidgeting. She looked at me and I looked at her, and the fire crackled between us, and neither of us said anything for what felt like a very long time. Then she said, "You would have known my father as Heinrich Voss. He came to your people 23 years ago with a sick wife and no money and a daughter who was 8 years old." I remembered Heinrich Voss. Not his face, that had blurred over the years, the way most white faces blurred for me. But I remembered the situation. A German immigrant, desperate, his wife burning with fever that had gone on too long, nothing left to trade. He had come to our camp because someone told him our medicine man, an old uncle of mine named Heron Standing, had cured things that white doctors could not cure. This was true. Heron Standing was very old and very skilled, and he did not work for nothing. What Heinrich Voss offered, when he had run out of everything else, was his daughter. Not as a slave, not as a wife, and he was very specific about this, and it was what made my uncle accept, because the old man respected precision in desperate men as a ward. To be raised among us for as long as Heron Standing required, to learn what he wished her to learn, to work as he directed. In exchange, he would treat the wife. The wife lived. Ilara was left. I was a young man then, 28, and I was not chief yet, and the arrangement was between her father and my uncle and none of my business. But I saw her that first winter, a small white girl who did not cry, which my uncle said was either very good or very bad, and he never determined which. I left for the south the following spring, and when I came back she was gone. Heron Standing had sent her back to her father when she was 12, when he decided she had learned what she needed to learn. I had not thought of her in many years. She knew this, sitting across my fire. She could see it in my face, I think, the slow process of remembering, the pieces coming together. And she waited patient while it happened. "He treated your wife," I said finally. Not a question. I was confirming what I already knew. "He did. She lived. Until I was 19, she looked at the fire. Then a winter took her. 11 years of life that would not have existed without the trade. That was what she was telling me, without saying it. That the debt had been paid in full, and more than paid, and she was here not to settle anything but for a different reason entirely." "Why have you come?" I said. She looked up from the fire. "Heron Standing sent me, before he died." That landed differently than I expected. My uncle had been dead for 4 years. I had been with him at the end, and he had said many things, and none of them had included this woman's name, which meant either he had spoken to her separately or she was lying. I studied her face and did not think she was lying, but I had been wrong about people before. "What did he say to you?" I asked. "He said, 'When you are ready, go find my nephew. He is the one who should have been given the choice.'" I sat with that for a while. The camp moved around us, children going to water, a woman hanging meat to dry, two old men playing the stick game in the shade of a cottonwood. Normal morning things. Ilara Voss sat and did not rush me. I was not given the choice. That was true. I had been told about the arrangement after the fact as something already decided. It had not occurred to me back then to have feelings about it. She was a child. The arrangement was between her father and my uncle, and it was not my business. But Heron Standing had looked backward at it from the end of his life and found it incomplete. He was not wrong. "What choice," I said, "does he think I should be given now?" She said, "Whether you want to know me." She camped on the edge of our circle that night without asking, set up a small arrangement of blankets and a bedroll, built a tiny fire she didn't need because the night wasn't cold, and cooked something on it anyway. I could see her fire from mine. I sat and watched it and then felt foolish for watching it and went inside my tipi and lay down and did not sleep for a long time. In the morning she was still there. She had already been to the creek and back. Her hair was damp. She was boiling something, cattail roots, I saw when I looked closer, and she held out a piece without saying anything, and I took it because I was hungry and it was a reasonable thing to do. We ate in silence for a while and then I said, "What did my uncle teach you?" She thought about how to answer. Mostly plants, which ones, which seasons, what part of the plant, how to look at someone who is sick and understand what the sickness is doing. He said most medicine is just listening to the person, to the plant, to the land. She paused. He also taught me Lakota, enough to speak it. She said the last sentence in Lakota, and her Lakota was not perfect. The accent was wrong and she chose formal words where informal ones would sit better, but it was real. It had roots in it. You can tell when someone was taught a language by someone who loved it, and she had been. Something moved in me that I did not have a name for. "How long did you stay?" I asked, "with him?" "4 winters, almost 5. She was quiet a moment. I didn't want to leave. "Why did he send you back?" She picked a piece of bark off the stick she was holding. "He said I was not Lakota and never would be, and that was not the point. The point was that I carry what he taught me and use it where I am. He said a medicine that only lives in one place is fragile. He wanted it to travel." I looked at her hands again. Cattail root in the coals, damp hair, the morning light coming flat across the plains. "And after," I said. "After he sent you back?" "I went back to my father. He had remarried by then, a good woman, kind to me. I helped with the younger children." She set down the stick. "And I kept practicing what he taught me. I've been working as a healer for 12 years, mostly around Yankton, mostly with families who can't pay a doctor. Some of your people." "Some of my people," I repeated. "Yes, I don't say that to make you think well of me. It's just what I do." There it was, that particular quality, saying a true thing without dressing it up or shrinking from it. My uncle had been that way. It takes something to speak plainly in a world that mostly speaks around what it means. I told her she could stay 2 more days. She said that was fine. She stayed 9. The 9th day was when things shifted, or maybe it was the 5th, or maybe it was always heading that way from the first moment. It's hard to know, looking back. Memory doesn't move in straight lines, and what feels inevitable at the end was not inevitable in the middle. What I remember is a particular afternoon, 5 or 6 days in maybe. I was working on a bridle that needed relacing, just sitting outside with the leather in my lap, and the sun going across, and she came and sat near me without saying anything and began grinding dried yarrow with the flat end of a stone. We worked like that, side by side, for most of an hour, not talking. I finished the lacing and started on a piece that needed the tongue replaced, and she ground the yarrow down to powder and started on something else, some root I didn't recognize. And the afternoon went by and the shadows moved, and at some point I realized this was the most at ease I had been in I could not say how long. That is a strange thing to discover in the company of a stranger. At supper that evening, one of the children, a boy named Little Fox, 9 years old with more energy than sense, came running into camp with a gash on his arm from a fall, crying and bleeding. Alara was the first one to him, not because she pushed anyone aside, because everyone else looked around for a moment and she was already moving. She knelt down in the dirt with him and talked to him while she looked at the cut, and her voice was calm and exact, and she said his name twice, which settled him. She cleaned the wound with something from the small bag she carried. She closed it with strips of a cloth she'd brought, already prepared, which told me she always moved through the world ready to fix what needed fixing. The boy stopped crying. His mother watched Alara wrap the bandage with precise hands and then looked at me with an expression I knew, the expression that says, "This one is worth something. My people know the difference between useful and performed. They always have." After Little Fox ran off, already forgetting he'd been injured, already back to running, Alara sat back on her heels in the dirt and washed her hands with water from her canteen, and I thought, my uncle knew what he was doing. He always had. The night before she was going to leave, the 8th night, and I knew she was leaving the next morning because she had said so the day before, matter of fact, the way she said everything. I built a bigger fire than usual. I don't know why. It was a warm night and it wasn't necessary. But I built it and sat by it, and after a while she came and sat across from me, which was where she had been the very first morning, except that by now she was not a stranger and something about closing that circle felt right. We sat for a while without talking. Then she said, "Can I ask you something?" "Yes." "What has your life been like since I left, the long version?" "No one asks me that. People ask me what I think, what I've decided, what I'm going to do, the weight of other people's lives. No one asks what mine has been." I looked at her across the fire. She was serious. She was asking because she wanted to know. So I told her. I told her about the years of negotiating with men who were always going to take more than they agreed to take, about the 2 wives and the grief of the first death and the different grief of the second leaving, about the year I spent on the run after a confrontation that could have ended differently, sleeping in creek beds with a rifle I'd had for 20 years, about what it meant to be responsible for 37 people and never once be able to put it down, about the particular exhaustion that is not tiredness. That is the weight of being the rock that doesn't move when everything else is moving. She listened. She didn't try to fix it. She didn't make the sounds people make when they are waiting for you to stop talking so they can speak. She just listened. The fire burned and the night moved around us, and she listened. When I was done, she didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said, "That sounds like a very long time to carry something alone." I didn't answer because there wasn't anything to say to that. It was just true. She poked at the fire, put another piece of wood on. The sparks went up and settled. "I'm coming back," she said. "If that's all right. I have things to finish in Yankton, people I can't leave without care, but I'll come back if you want that." I looked at her across the fire. Her face in the light of it, those dark eyes, the steadiness in them. A woman who had been given away as a child and grown into someone who gave herself where she chose. That was the whole story of her, right there. "Come back," I said. She nodded once, the way she did things, no excess in it. She was gone 41 days. I counted them without meaning to. Kept track the way you keep track of things you're not admitting you're keeping track of. The camp went on being itself, the slow daily work of existence on the plains, the wind, the grass, the sky that never stopped. I did what I had always done. But there was a particular quality to those 41 days that I had not felt in a long time, which was the quality of waiting for something. She came back on a Tuesday, which I only know because the trader who came through camp 2 days later mentioned the day. She came from the northeast in the afternoon, and she had a horse I hadn't seen before, a gray with a white face, and a pack that was bigger than the one she'd left with. She rode into camp without ceremony. I was mending a fence post when she came. I heard the hooves and looked up, and there she was, and she saw me and rode over and stepped down from the horse and stood in front of me. "I brought Heron Standing's medicine chest," she said. "He left it to me. It's been sitting in my father's barn." She paused. "I thought it should be here." That is the word for what she is. She had been carrying his knowledge for 19 years, carrying his tools, carrying what he gave her, and now she was bringing it home. I put down the fence post. I looked at her, the travel dust on her coat, the gray horse standing patient behind her, the chest strapped to the pack. "There's a tippy at the south end of the circle," I said. "It's been empty since Heron Standing died. I haven't given it to anyone." She understood what I meant. Not just a tippy, an acknowledgement, a place in the circle. "That's more than I came expecting," she said. "I know what you came expecting," I said. "You came expecting to earn it." She looked at me. Something moved in her face, not soft exactly, but open, the way a held thing releases. "Yes," she said. "You don't have to earn it," I said. "My uncle paid that bill 23 years ago. What you do from here, that's not payment. That's just your life. You can live it wherever you choose." She was quiet for a moment. Then she stepped forward and put her hand against my chest, flat, like checking for a heartbeat. Just her hand and the warmth of it through my shirt, and her eyes looking at me. No performance, no sentiment, just a woman saying with her hand what neither of us had put into words yet. I put my hand over hers. We stood like that in the afternoon light, in the middle of all the ordinary activity of the camp, and nobody looked at us, because by then nobody was surprised. I want to be precise about what happened after, not romantic about it. She moved into Heron Standing's tippy and began working within a week, because there was always work. There was a child with a cough that had lasted too long, an old woman whose joints had swollen through the winter, a man who had cut himself badly on a wagon wheel. She worked without asking to be watched or praised. She asked me questions about the people when she needed context, their history, what they'd been through, what mattered to them, and I answered. And that was how we began to talk seriously, the way people talk when they are solving something together. 2 months in, she moved her bedroll into my tippy. She told me, not asked me. I said nothing, because it was what I wanted and she knew it. There was a morning that fall, the light already going amber and thin, the cold starting to come at night, when I woke early and she was already up, already outside, already doing something. I got up and went out, and she was standing at the edge of camp looking east at the light coming up over the plain, not doing anything, just standing there. And she heard me come out and looked over her shoulder at me with that look, steady, dark-eyed, the look of a woman who has arrived somewhere she intended to arrive and is satisfied with how it looks. I went and stood beside her. The light came up. The prairie went gold and then orange and then the everyday pale of itself. The camp woke up around us, the sounds of morning. She put her hand through my arm, easy and familiar, and leaned against my shoulder for a moment. And I felt the weight of her and the warmth of her, and the particular sense that comes over a man when he realizes he is not carrying everything alone anymore. Not because anyone took the weight from him. Because someone decided to stand beside it. 37 people were my responsibility, and they still were, and the world had not gotten simpler, and the treaties were still wrong, and the land was still shrinking, and none of that had changed. But that morning, with the light coming up and her hand through my arm, I thought, my uncle saw this. He looked back at something that had gone incomplete, and he saw it. He sent her. The fire between us was mine to build after that, and I built it. The planes went on in all directions, the same as they always had. But I was not out there alone in them anymore, and she was not belonging to no one anymore, and Heron standing, wherever he had gone, was probably satisfied. He had always known when a thing was done right.